When Toyota wanted to sell their Corolla for even less money, they cut features and slapped a Scion badge on it. When Alienware wanted to sell their notebooks for less money, they didn't. Dell just kind of bought them, gutted them, and now uses their badge to sell overpriced crap. But hey, the Dell G15 is an affordable gaming machine, and we're gonna see how well it games because this is
Slap Tech.
The first thing to be mentioned is the behavior of the display. This is Dead Cells, a game that's as beautiful as it is deadly in high refresh rates. When in full screen mode, the G15 renders games at only 60 frames per second, even though it's a 120Hz display. When you switch to windowless full screen mode, the counter goes up to 120, but it doesn't look like 120 frames per second. There is a difference. You can see it while moving the mouse on the desktop. When playing games, it doesn't look like windowless full screen is showing 120 Hz. And when you're in full screen mode, even though VSync is off, it still only goes up to 60 FPS, and I'm pretty damn sure that some kind of VSync is going on. When connected to an external display, none of these problems materialize. It's only an issue when using the built-in display. Now that I've explained that, on to the next game. Snake Pass is a great benchmark for whether a GPU is not necessarily high-end, but capable enough for AAA gaming, and in this instance, the lowly RTX 3050 passes with flying colors. Nary a frame is dropped and the gameplay proceeds without stuttering or buffering of any kind. That is the 4 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM hard at work. So it can do this, but can it do ray tracing? Sure, it'll do ray tracing if asked. It won't do a great job, but it'll get her done. This is Quake 2 RTX with all the tricks Nvidia has up its sleeve. It struggles to reach 40 FPS, but it is still playable. A much smoother experience can be had at low ray tracing quality, though 60 frames per second is still out of reach. Something to keep in mind is that the RTX 2060 from the previous generation shows noticeably better performance than this, giving us about the same frames per second in high details. And a used RTX 2060 laptop is about the same price, if not lower, than the Dell G15. Back to this RTX 3050 now, here's Diablo 3. It's another game that's limited to 60 FPS in full screen, but here in the highest of details, a smooth gameplay session is all that will be had, no matter how many magic missiles are flying on the screen. I did notice an occasional stutter, which wasn't reflected in the FPS counter. Turning on VSync smoothed out about 90% of that, and doing so didn't seem to introduce any input lag like previous Core i5 processors succumbed to, like before 10th gen. So yeah, you'll be fine. Even though this game is called Control, it's the wildest child of the bunch. This is the only game that won't hold back their FPS. It will gladly go over 60 if it so desires. Unfortunately for us, it doesn't desire to do so while in high details, even with DLSS on. The detail settings have to be reduced to medium while DLSS remains on for that high refresh rate kind of performance to come out of hiding. And I don't believe it. Literally, I don't believe that it's actually going higher than 60 FPS. It's still behaving like a 60 Hz screen where going higher than the refresh rate of the monitor will produce stuttering, and that's what I noticed here. This screen behaves more like an overclocked 60 Hz screen than an actual 120 Hz display. Another example of this behavior is Witcher 3. Here in borderless window mode, the counter shows over 60, but the picture looks like less than 60 thanks to the introduction of micro stuttering. At least the frame rate itself is reliably more than 60 in max detail so that when it's changed to full screen, we get a perfectly smooth 60. Something else to keep in mind is that this smooth of an experience is not guaranteed if working with the original 8 gigs of memory. 16 gigs is the requisite amount for performance of this minute magnitude. But wait! There's more Witcher 3! Here's some footage from the new patch they just released, or as I like to call it, Gears of Witcher 3. Thanks to the expanded level of detail sliders, the highest detail level no longer looks ultra smooth but skips here and there. What's funny about the new detail levels is that Novigrad used to be the most intensive part of the game, but that's been reversed. Now, everywhere there's grass is the most intensive part of the game. How nice. And now we can turn on ray tracing for that extra ooh factor, and here's what that looks like. Sorry I couldn't get the counter to appear while in DirectX 12 mode, but you should be able to tell that this runs like total crap. Turning on DLSS in Ultra Performance helps a little bit, but not much. So basically, keep Witcher 3 the way it was before the patch with the RTX 3050. Noted. In other news, here's Valheim. When cranked up all the way, the simpler environments allow for an easy 60. Frolicking in the forest and other parts of the game with more detail will cause the performance to dip, but nothing too catastrophic as to make it less enjoyable. A complex housing quarters will also be a challenge for the RTX 3050, but it's also a challenge for a lot of other GPUs as well. Fortunately, Valheim is still a pretty game when you knock a couple settings down by just a tick, and that'll go a long way towards increasing the performance. Enjoy! Shadow of the Tomb Raider is still a valid benchmark these days. The RTX 3050 has little trouble with it in the highest details preset. Granted, DLSS is on at its most aggressive and blur-inducing setting. Not that I'm complaining, I think it still looks cool, but after playing like this for an extended period of time in many sessions, suddenly looking at the game with a more capable GPU would make me go, oh, I didn't think it could look this good. And we're definitely not going to be saying that with the Dell G15, seeing as how turning off DLSS does this to the FPS. Honestly, I'd rather play this game with DLSS on and the details cranked up to max. Keep in mind you can't do that without an RTX GPU, so you're out of luck with the GTX 1650 or 1660. Just saying. Okay, I'm aching for a racing title, so I'll just throw anything I have at my disposal. Here's Forza Horizon 5, even with ray tracing disabled and DLSS maxed out. This is far too much of a challenge for the RTX 3050. Have no fear, for taking in the lowest details preset down 2 ticks to high will cure all the ills. Now we're seeing at 60 FPS, sadly. Okay, excellent, let's move on. Yay. We'll wrap up this video with Warhammer Dark Tide because it just came out. Ray tracing is available, but disabled in this case, while otherwise everything is set to max details with DLSS doing its max performance DLSS thing. For the most part, it's a consistently good frame rate. Sure, it dips when the hordes come rolling in and it might trip up someone's Twitch aiming, however, that's nothing that a couple drops of details won't fix if it becomes an issue at all. This has been Playing Games with the Dell G15 5520 with an Intel Core i5 and RTX 3050. I regularly feature affordable gaming laptops, so if you want to know more about budget gaming notebook options, be sure to subscribe. I will show you the way, my child. I'll scoop you up out of the clutches of the popular hardware review channels and coddle you with years of gaming experience and a based worldview. Given enough time, you'll be assured that you don't have to spend oodles upon oodles of money on useless crap that won't do you any good anyway. And then when the cycle is complete, you'll be just like me, old, tired, and sick of all the hype and bloated hardware prices. Ignore the fact that I'm editing and rendering this video on a $2,400 gaming notebook with an RTX 3070. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. In any case, thanks for watching, and you guys, have a good night.